united in diversity. We are very heterogeneous in our opinion.
If we do not renew our partnerships with the rest of the world, Europe will not be relevant.
We can make it if we are together as Europeans.
Do you genuinely believe that countries will manage to reach these very ambitious targets?
Good morning, and welcome to Politico's Tech and AI Summit. My name is Aoife White, and I'm Politico's Technology and Competition Editor. We are nearing the end of what feels like a revolutionary policy cycle. During this 5-year mandate, the European Commission, EU governments, and the European Parliament have drafted and implemented a lot of legislation. They've tried to respond to the concerns people have about the technological revolution we are living through, at the same time as we experienced a massive leap forward with artificial intelligence, lived through a pandemic that changed how we spend our days, and tried to tackle immense new challenges from climate change, war, and a changing geopolitical scene. In the last few months alone, we've seen tech platforms called to account for disinformation and how they use their market power in both the Digital Services Act and the Digital Markets Act. As artificial intelligence revved up into a new era with the rapid launch of large language models, that's ChatGPT to you and me, the European Union moved swiftly to roll out the AI Act, setting principles for how this technology should be used and engaged with governments around the world. At the same time, the EU has needed to address the backbone of the tech services we love to use by trying to improve and extend telecoms networks and deal with supply chain chokes by producing some key semiconductors in Europe. Security has leapt up the agenda, both in dealing with attacks on technology and weighing Europe's economic reliance on other parts of the world. In this year of elections, policymakers are also trying to tackle disinformation that may aim to influence our democracies. It's a lot, and I hope our excellent speakers today can help guide you through some of it. We are very fortunate to have 2 commissioners here with us today, 1 minister, many of the officials, politicians, and companies who wrestle with these questions to find the right answers. Before we kick off, I'd like to thank our partners for making this summit possible, our leading partners Amazon and Microsoft, and our presenting partner Google. A few housekeeping rules. We like debate. Please talk about us on X or the social media of your choice. Our X hashtag is #PoliticoTechAI. Some sessions will include a Q&A for our audience here in the room. Those sessions are indicated on our program, which is online, and our moderators will let you know when there will be questions from the audience. As a general rule, we ask you to raise snappy questions, avoid statements, and indicate who you are and which organization you represent. We will have breaks where you can talk to each other. Please make sure you check out our Pro and Research Analysis Division's booth and all the installations in the networking area. But right now, we are very pleased to welcome on the stage Margrethe Vestager, the Executive Vice President for Europe Fit for the Digital Age at the European Commission, and our Chief Technology Correspondent, Mark Scott. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning, everybody. First things first, the microphone does work, which is always a good start.
Yeah, we can check it while I try to prevent the Sofagate.
Aoife kind of gave a very good, first of all, welcome, good morning.
Thank you.
Aoife gave a very encapsulating overview of what's happened over the last 4 or 5 years. We have an alphabet soup of regulation, the DSA, DMA, GGA, Data Act, AI Act. We could go on forever. It's a lot to take in, and particularly those who are working in the room and those who are streaming in over the internet. There's a bit of confusion, at least I find it confusing, and I cover this full time, about what this all means, because as much as everyone realizes things are changing, how all the legislation fits together, or frankly doesn't fit together in some ways, can be difficult to unpack. So before we get into some of the nitty-gritty, give us the macro view in terms of all this has been passed this tenure for the Commission. How does it all piece together for you?
Well, the first decision to take was what are the basics of our strategy? And that sounds trivial, but it is actually core, which is that technology should serve people. In order for that to happen, you need to trust technology, that it is used to create better societies and that we are all counted in. And second, for having dynamic societies, you need an open, contestable market, and you need services to be delivered in the way that you can actually trust to be safe. In order to fuel all of that, obviously you need data. And that to be managed and delivered in a manageable format, absolutely essential.
So you mentioned a few things there: contestable markets, trust, safety. That all, I mean, those are things we all can agree on. But I'm just trying to understand how these litany of legislation is going to make that happen. The DMA, Digital Markets Act, is just sort of coming to force. The Digital Services Act has been going for about 5-6 months. We have an election in the European Parliament coming up. In terms of, let's take the European election. How does the DSA make it safer? And more in particular, do you think the DSA is in a good shape right now to make the June election safe from potential foreign interference, harmful content, that sort of thing?
Well, the platforms who are systemic, who would really have muscle, so very large online platforms, they would have the obligation to make sort of a horizontal risk assessment. Are my services safe to use? Both can they be harmful to people's mental health, or can they be used to undermine election integrity? So that's the first principle, that you need to make sure that the way that you provide services is not damaging. And we've been writing to these service providers to say, well, you need to be careful, because with AI on top of things, your pledge to watermark and to recognize fake material or artificially created material actually kicks in already, even though the AI Act has not kicked in by now. Yep. So that helps all the other initiatives that comes to enable election integrity. And of course, the different pieces of legislation, they come together. But the basics would be the Declaration of Digital Rights and Principles. And of course, it's a solemn declaration between the Council, the Parliament, and the Commission. But it also states what you can expect of the legislation that has been passed in a way that is, I think, direct, understandable, where you also know that there is actually legislation that underpins this, that gives enforcers the right to actually enforce, so that your rights are not just an empty shelf.
You mentioned risk assessment audits, and as a policy wonk, I love that. That's my language. But if I'm a Hungarian or a Pole or a Spaniard going to the polls and I'm seeing harmful content on, I don't know, Instagram or I don't know, YouTube, etc., that sort of technocratic policy instrument of risk assessment audits, etc., it seems very far away. How do you make it personal for people who are seeing quite graphic content right now ahead of the election?
Well, first and foremost, of course, if it works, you shouldn't see things that are crazy to undermine your election. And this is why we have the two investigations towards Twitter and towards TikTok, because we have the suspicion that they have not done the job. This is not sort of a blessing of the others, but just to say with these two companies, we actually do think that something is wrong. Second thing is that you have two obligations, not only the risk assessment and mitigating the risks, but also to supply a system. So if it's flagged to you, this is not good, then you should actually take it down. Tell the people who have put it up that it's been taken down, enable them to complain about it, so that people can actually engage with the platforms to say, I don't think that this is legal. I consider this harmful content. And then the platforms will have to take it from there. And that is one of the grievances we have with Twitter. They seem to have not invested in a moderating system that can actually have these mechanisms work.
But those investigations, as you know from your competition background, take a long time. The European election is now 2 months away. So do you think, given the fact that those will be ongoing, and as much as people are flagging it, there are things to be worked out, the European election is a good time for the DSA to come in terms of getting it enforceable, effective, and making an impact for average citizens?
Well, I don't think that one should hope for a fake-free internet or fake-free social media. I don't think that is possible. But I think that you can go quite a long way in order to get there. Just as well as the real world is not free of fraud. You know, you can be scammed. Someone can knock on your door and lure you into inviting you in while you steal their valuables. So there will still be harm done, just as well as our real world is also a world where harm happens. But we can go quite far, and the DSA is obviously only one of the tools. It's a systematic tool. But over the years, under the impressive leadership of my colleague Vera Jourova, a lot has been done in order to make sure that you have in place a code of conduct, you have businesses taking the obligations actually to do something about it. So it is one of the tools, but it reflects, I think, a work that has been ongoing for a very long time. This is a gigantic election year, but there are elections every year in Europe. So, of course, election integrity is a priority for the Commission, also in election years that are less prominent than the one that we're in.
Of course. But I have to whittle through some of these topics because I see the clock is ticking down. You mentioned in your remarks the openness of contestable markets. I've been doing this job for a decade now, and when I came first to Brussels, the big companies were Google, Apple, Facebook, now Meta, Amazon, etc. I'd look now, and we could maybe add ByteDance, Alibaba to that, arguably Spotify, if you sort of want to throw in a European champion, if you will. But the underlying digital infrastructure is still in the hands, and I'm not making a political statement, it's just that's what it is, of those 5 to 7 companies. Now looking forward to the next iteration, we are seeing AI come in, and many of those companies are similarly making bets, investments in that space. Are you confident that in terms of an openness and contestable markets, we will have that going forward, particularly when AI becomes so entrenched in everything that we do?
Yeah, I noticed that some of my most loyal customers are also the sponsors of today's event.
Yeah.
But if you take a case like one of the first Amazon cases that we actually settled, it was in the ebook market. We started with German and English language ebooks, but we took commitments in a very, very broad spectrum of ebooks. And today you have a thriving ebook market in all languages, many different readers. It has developed as a real open competitive market. I have very good hopes for the most present Amazon case, where we looked at how they have, used data from all the merchants on that platform in order to know in real time what is selling, what are the prices people are willing to pay, in order for that to stop and for a second buy box to emerge if it's an Amazon product that is in the first buy box. So I think that the individual cases, they have full merit. But the problem is that first, it takes some time, and second, that the learning curve has an impressive trajectory, to put it mildly. And this is why I think the DMA comes in as a complementary tool. But I completely share this idea that one needs to look at AI. It was the prime area of discussion when I met with colleagues in the US, so the FTC and the DOJ. We have this technology competition policy dialogue. And this is core, because we have had our own surveys. We're trying to figure out what will happen, how can we best also ourselves use AI. But we need also a global approach, because if entrenched market power needs something as the DMA, in order for the market to stay open, well, of course, we may consider how can we even better use these tools if AI is entrenching market power even more.
So back in 2014, Facebook acquired WhatsApp, which had very low revenue, and they did it for a stock and share deal worth $19 billion. And that didn't meet the threshold for competition in investigation or looking at that deal. We now fast forward 10 years, and say Microsoft is making similar sort of partnership deals with OpenAI, Mistral in France. We are seeing other companies, the large company, the GAFA companies, making similar deals where they might not hit a revenue threshold, but there is definitely a partnership that entrenches market power. Do you think the DMA is sufficiently in place to look at those deals? I know your colleagues in the UK think, actually in the same conference you were in DC, mentioned their concerns. Are you concerned about those type of deals and partnerships, about how that will grow that, potentially not grow that market?
Well, that is one of the things that we discuss. Everybody is trying to figure out what happened. Is there a change of control in these kind of deals? So we're on it, so to speak, and we do think that the way we use our merger rules will allow us to look at deals even if they're not notifiable, if member states agree to that. So instead of having sort of blanket obligations for everyone to report everything, which would be a high, I think, regulatory burden, then we have, a net which is much more, I think, elegant and dynamic in order to see relevant deals and to look into that with a merger tool.
Your US colleagues have been public about their concerns. Your British counterparts similarly. Do you share this equal wariness about those type of partnerships?
Well, I think they're different. I think the Mistral deal is different from the OpenAI deal, is different from the Inception deal. So they will work in different ways. And I'm just very careful to make sort of blanket judgments as to what will be the nature of the developing AI sector. As we speak, we are sort of paving the way for smaller European businesses to use the European hyperscale computer infrastructure in order to develop and test models. So I think depending on demand and access to the innovation capabilities that you need, you may see change. Also because for all of those who implement AI solutions right now, it's really not attractive just to have one supplier, because then you're really in the hands of that supplier. So I think there will be a dynamic in the AI development and the AI customer market in the years to come that will be difficult to foresee, but depending on whether or not we can make available the resources that it takes to develop artificial intelligence. And here, of course, also the semiconductor industry comes in, because the lack and the shortages of graphic units has been also very decisive as to who could actually come on board and develop their technology.
I mean, you mentioned chips and the infrastructure to this. I think, again, somewhat pivoting to your, I presume, meetings in the US, you were quite hawkish on China during your discussion speech in Princeton. And the Americans have always been very eager for the Europeans to be more willing to push back against China. And looking at that next step and how you see collaboration with your US colleagues going forward on semiconductors, how much do you think Europe has shifted towards I wouldn't say American approach, but more skeptical approach about its dealings with China on tech?
Well, I think part of my responsibility is to give, body and muscle to what our president have said, which is that we should not decouple, but we should de-risk. And of course, we do not talk a lot about the not decouple, because that is all the normal dealings with China that you do. Clothes are produced in China, things are produced in China, we trade with China. We don't talk a lot about that because we consider that not risky. We talk a lot about what we can consider to be risky, and I think that is why sometimes it can seem unbalanced. But this is because we did not have this discussion before. We did not provide a European prism through which member states could exercise their competence when it comes to economic security. And one of the very good reasons to work with the Americans about this is that if we want to be able to trust technology, we need a large market for trusted technology. Otherwise, the price tag for trust becomes really, really large. And this is why we have this idea, actually inspired by the Japanese, because they have been doing economic security for decades, for obvious reasons. And that is an idea to develop objective criteria of trustworthiness. What can be trusted? Do that in a circle of like-minded, but actually use them in the global market, because then you get scale. And with scale comes an affordable price tag. So that would be a way to approach it, also because you can recognize a Chinese playbook for areas where there is economic security risks associated. We saw that in solar panels.
This sounds like a very silly question, but in terms of providing an EU prism for economic security, I can understand the Commission's perspective on that, but I think member countries rightly have different views. So from your perspective, I know the Commission recently laid out this, but how do you balance the need for that prism with the legitimate differences that member countries have in terms of how they approach a country like China?
Well, I think there's both sort of the directs, where I think it has been important that we now have sort of European tools to avoid countries being coerced by China. We saw that. It's been a huge problem if you feel very much alone. So it's trying also to make the entirety of the European Union sort of target, if you want, because then we are bigger, we are more impressive, we obviously have more muscle. But also, if you consider, for instance, export control measures with the US, well, the negotiation position is different if you have Europe at the table. Also, because a lot of export control discussions, they involve more European countries than just one, which means that there is a European dimension. And in order to coordinate, in order to make sure that it's effective, I think to have Europe, in case you hear the Commission at the table, actually helps to make sure that things are balanced.
But balanced, but it would be fair to say more hawkish than it was, say, even 5 years ago?
Not hawkish. In this, I speak about more balance towards only the Americans deciding.
Got it, okay.
Because we're in the process of developing sort of this prism, what we find to be risky. So with member states, we're analyzing sort of semiconductors, quantum, AI, biotech, to see, well, what are the things that are precious to us? Where do we find that there is economic security issues that we would want to preserve? Because otherwise, we are very much a taker of a US risk analysis as to what they find to be risky with their perspective. Sometimes our risk analysis will mirror the American ones. Sometimes it will be different because this is Europe and not the United States. And in that, I think we will be stronger, and member states will have, better tools to assess how they negotiate if they're met with demands also from the US on export control.
With the 3.5 minutes I have left, I'd need to turn to the next commission. It sounds a bit hellish because you're still in your role, but given the fact that you've been here and done the current job for quite a while, where do you see the next iteration of both the Parliament and the Commission need to go in terms of digital? Do we need any more digital rules? Do we have enough? And with the alphabet soup that we discussed, where do you think the priority should be for the next 5 years?
Well, I've been here for a decade. That is indeed some years. It's difficult to say if we have everything we need because we only started to implement. And if you only started to implement, you will not know if you have the full suite of things that you need. And for me, of course, there will also be legislation in the next mandate, obviously. But my hope is just that they will focus a lot of implementation because promises have been made, laws have been passed. We need to implement in full the Digital Services Act. We have the investigation. Digital Markets Act, we're getting closer to the business model. You see, well, we have 5 cases of non-compliance, which shows that it's getting crunchy by now. We still have a lot to do when it comes to digital literacy, to bridge the digital divide. There's really a lot to do, and the next commission, if enforcing, they will have results like this. And that is the benefit of coming in as a commission where a lot of legislation have been passed, that if you enforce in full, you can actually deliver to citizens without having to wait for legislation to kick in.
Are you confident in terms of implementation, the resources, both personnel and frankly euros, are there to make that happen?
Well, I think it's always fair enough that a publicly funded institution has resource limitations because that makes you make priorities. But I do hope that resources will increase for these new enforcement tasks, especially because we get to things that are really close to the business model. And that also, at least tells me, that it will be harsher actually to make things change, to make things happen. And for that, of course, you need resources.
Before we came on stage, we were sort of talking about sort of the wizardry of generative AI and cloning people's voices. That didn't even exist, at least in the sort of public sphere 2-3 years ago. In terms of how your use of tech has changed, I see you're an avid Instagrammer and you still use X or Twitter. What has shifted in your both view of it and how you use technology?
Well, I think I'm not as enthusiastic as I used to be. And I have taken, the advice of my children. I have 3 daughters, and they just say, "Put down that phone, Mom."
So they don't use it as much as you?
No, they don't.
Interesting.
They don't.
Well, I'm not trying to end it there. That's mic drop.
But it is good advice. It is good advice because I think my generation have sort of come into social media and what have when they're like, wow. You know, I was one of the first Danish politicians on Twitter because it was new and we had no money and you could get to people, and I made all the possible mistakes that you can do before I got a bit of savage doing it. You know, I think we came into it with such we were so encouraged. We found this was not new and shiny. The next generation, they'd be like, so what? It's not safe. It's stealing my time. I want to be with people. Put down that phone.
And with that public service announcement, Executive Vice President, thank you so much. Before we go, I just want to let, first of all, thank you so much for being with us. There we go. I would ask everyone in the room to please stay in your seats. We have opening remarks from Amazon's Eric Saarnio, the Vice President from Amazon Devices International. And then we have my excellent colleague, Clotilde Gouillard, who will be on the first panel with four MEPs on European tech regulation. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good morning and welcome to this first panel of the day after this great talk with Executive Vice President Margrethe Vestager. If you're tuning in now or joining us in the room, this is Politico's Tech and AI Summit. I'm Clotilde Gouillard and I'm a senior tech reporter here at Politico. And we have a panel today on what to look forward to in the next mandate with some great MEPs with us today. This mandate, we saw a lot of different tech laws for content moderation, artificial intelligence, data, the media. So now everyone is asking, is this enough? Do we need more? Do we need fewer regulation, a bit of a break for everyone? So this is what we'll be talking about. Just a reminder that we will you can talk about the panel on X or on the social media network of your choice. Our hashtag is #PoliticoTechAI. And by the end of the talk, there will be a little Q&A, so don't hesitate to prepare if you have questions you want to ask by the end. I also forgot, but there's been a brief change in program, so we'll be hearing from Eric from Amazon by the end of our session. But now, most importantly, I'll introduce our distinguished panelist today. We have MEP Dita Taranzova, Czech politician for the Renew Group, Mia Petra Kumpula-Natri, Finnish MEP from the S&D Group, and last but not least, Kim van Sparentak from the Greens and from the Netherlands. We do have one missing MEP or one missing group, and that's the European People's Party, the EPP. Reached out to a dozen different EPP MEPs, but they all declined, so we don't have the EPP voice on this panel today, unfortunately, but we'll try to do our best to have a sort of balanced and interesting discussion about what's been happening and what will happen next. All three of you have been very active working on tech legislation in the last few years, Data Act, Digital Services Act, the infamous gig work law. First of all, quick question for you. Quickly, first, are you running for the next election? And what was the file, the tech file, that you think has made the biggest difference that you work on in this mandate? Dita, I'll start with you. Are you running?
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for the invitation. No, I'm not running. I'm not running. And as for the files, I think you named them. But since I work on the Digital Services Act, so for me, that was the biggest challenge and the biggest adventure. And now I will be watching the implementation.
All right. Mia Petra?
Very good morning, too. I think the reason that I have time to be here and I enjoy here that I am not stressing for the elections. So I'm going back to the Finnish parliament after 10 years. I already had the seat last year. And in Finland, you have the constitution that 2 reasons you can postpone your seat or someone is taking that is for the military service, as we still have a conscription, or the MEP. So I decided to stay until end and go back after first year.
And what is a tech file you believe has made the biggest difference?
Well, I had the honor to write a data strategy in the beginning of this term, and then it was honor to read some commission proposals that based on the parliament questioning and asking. So I think that was like my personal victory or fingerprint. So that really trying to push the data to move and have more enterprises having access, consumers having access, to break the silos, also to give accessibility for the data. So I was working on the Data Act, but maybe my media was not that good because nobody's talking about Data Act. We are only talking about AI and platforms. So I'm also very happy of those legislations.
Kim, what about you?
Yeah, I am running again. But I'm here, and I guess it's being from the Netherlands, you know, it's quite a short commute, so I think it's doable. I think when it comes to what we have done with the AI Act is pretty big. I was at that infamous 38-hour trilogue, so that is an achievement we have. We have the longest trilogue record, and I'm very hopeful that we will actually have an impact with the AI Act, but of course, still needs to, we still need to see how the implementation goes. We're not at that stage yet, but I really think we have managed to make a difference for people who are exposed to AI. So I'm very proud of that.
Talking about AI, this remains the hot topic in town. And even though you finalized the AI Act, which was in itself very historic in terms of regulating this new technology, there's already talk around town that more specific laws are needed to tackle issues like copyright, workers' rights, to name a few. What do you think? Do we need to create even more laws on AI, or is this a time to stop and try to see how we can already implement the AI Act?
Well, I think it's very important to understand that the AI Act is regulating how these products are made, but we don't have any rules on how they're being used yet, or hardly any rules on how they're being used. And I think it's extremely important that, first of all, actually we have a broader societal discussion on that. Because when I talk with workers, more and more they realize, oh, actually, yes, my Microsoft Word has become, a tool with which my manager can survey everything I do. But we actually didn't have a discussion with trade unions or any other workers' organization whether we actually want that. And next to that, there's of course a lot of things happening with technology that workers are not even aware of in their companies. So I think it's very important that besides having, this very strong law on how we are going to make AI and make sure that it's safe, ethical, unbiased, with some limitations on how to use it when it's too risky, we also have rules on how, for example, employers can use it in a situation where there's a huge power imbalance. And I'm really looking forward, hopefully, to work on that in the next mandate.
Mia Petra, what's your point of view on this?
Well, I think that we aimed for the framework, so that is horizontal and applies everywhere, and we can do the implementation. But then at the same time, I don't know what, in my history of 21 years in the parliaments and working for Prime Minister and in the politics, so a quarter of century, no legislation was sufficient enough and then never gone back. So when we did the climate, when we did the road safety, there is the things that you need to fill the gaps. So I would swear that we don't regulate AI ever again or next mandate. Of course, the implementation is still a lot to do. It's not like everything we can read from the AI Act that how the things are going on, but then the implementation phase is very important. I wish that the countries can also stay coherent so that we still have internal market. That is always the risky when we go for the implementation and national authorities. So emphasis on that one, that it will remain this way, the European. But then very good examples on the trade, on the workers' side. There is this that you have to tell the workers what technology is used, and that was part of the data strategy also that we Parliament proposed. And it really comes closer and closer to white collars. I used to say that what the automatization did for the blue collars, the AI is doing for white collars. So I think that all here should be considered that how much of your daily routines is analyzed. Is it your sweating, like how humidity your working room is? Would you like to know if they measure that? Or your voice when you use the phone of your work employers? And all that, because we have already cases that these are analyzed, and I visited the factories that can provide the Luxus model of the negotiation rooms and so on and so on. So I think it's not it's inconvenient if you don't know and agree together. So it will be not that political. I think it is very European. But then also, I have to ask the question that have we done enough for the mental health of our youth and children? And answer is, I think 99% here share the idea, no. So we have to keep on doing something better on that one. Our youth and children, they are not well. Maybe even I have shared the opinion of the commissioner that also the adults are there, but it's easier to talk about the others and not yourself. Yeah. Like the children and youth, while we are scrolling the mobiles all the time.
Dita, AI, mental health, any more laws that need to be worked on in the next mandate?
Well, being liberal, I'm not a big fan that with every problem we come up with a new regulation. I very much agree with what Kim said at the beginning, that AI Act, it just didn't happen out of the blue. I mean, it has been a long journey. I remember during the last mandate, we adopted the first ever resolution about the AI. A lot of people learned at that time that the word robot comes from the Czech language, for instance. Oh, you didn't read the resolution.
I didn't read that one.
Anyway, and then we had a special committee. We listened to the stakeholders, we listened to the businesses. So it's always a long journey. And I think now we completed this journey with the AI Act, which is not completed yet, because there are how many? 12 delegated acts, 10 implemented acts, guidelines, I don't know. There is a lot to come still to actually, address all the issues that are still kind of open. So I think what we will see during the next mandate is more to see the enforcement, to see, and it will be very tricky because every commissioner, when everybody comes, they want to produce, So we will have to make sure that they produce kind of reports for implementations of enforcement, so they are not pushed to really produce just for the sake of producing. I know there are issues like, and we keep hearing a lot about copyrights, for instance, but I do remember the copyright reform, which was for me still the nightmare that I do not want to repeat again. But perhaps we can ask the Commission to look how the copyrights and the AI databases work together and things like that. But it would be more the guidelines that I would expect from the Commission.
We're hearing also in this global race for AI that Europe needs to put more money, invest in these new technologies, and also try to lessen the burden, the regulatory burden, as they call it. In the EPP manifesto, they even called for a readjustment of data protection rules to enable more innovation in the field of AI. Dita, would you go as far as saying, let's reopen, let's say, the GDPR, for example?
I think looking at what is on the table, and GDPR has been implemented for some time already, I can see some merits looking at what we can do around GDPR. I think if you talk to people, people are annoyed with all the cookies panels pumping up and all the legitimate interest that you have to click on. But at the same time, I personally fear that there is a lot of also interest to somehow combine it with e-privacy, and then it would be a really difficult one. So yes, there are some parts where I can see merits to looking at it, but it will not be an easy exercise.
Current polling predictions point to a more polarized parliament shifting further to the right in the next mandate. Kim, what sort of impact do you think this could have on the sort of digital policy making in the parliament?
Well, to be honest, like the kind of right that will probably grow, it's very unclear on where they stand on digital policy. I think when it comes to digital policy, there it's the most difficult to sort of assess whether they're going to be happy with things or not. In general, they're against everything. So, of course, we will have a smaller group of people to actually make laws with. That's basically what is going to happen. And of course, the push for less regulatory burden, as you just said, will probably be bigger, which I find very fascinating because when, for example, it comes to copyright or GDPR privacy laws, there are amazing things happening actually in the industry to actually make sure that you are GDPR compliant, copyright compliant, and that actually, copyright owners also get some benefit from the use in AI models when they're being trained. When it comes to more rules, then they're like, no, but it will hamper innovation. We actually have to make sure that businesses do whatever they can. But now businesses are doing whatever they can, and they're actually making sure they're compliant with the legislation. And then the EPP is going to say, oh, no, but the legislation too much. Well, business is already proving that they can actually do it. So I'm afraid we're going to have more and more of those discussions. But what I truly hope is that we are going to push, for policy that promotes innovation, but where we actually, are brave enough to choose what kind of innovation we want in Europe. Because I find it the most frustrating to say we want to foster innovation by having fewer rules and by investing, but then we just pour money all over the market without actually choosing where we want to go. Let's be the leaders in the health sector. Let's be the leaders in other types of ethical AI that's actually good for people, good for the environment. Indeed, what you just said, Mia Petra, making sure that people will have healthy working conditions rather than also pushing for, scary surveillance technologies. So what I mainly hope is that, if the right becomes bigger, they gonna have this rational way of looking at innovation and not so much as, we just have to make sure we don't have that much rules, because I really don't believe that's how we come forward in Europe.
Mia Petra, what do you think about this potential shift to the right and how this may affect digital policy making in the next mandate?
All the policy making will be more difficult if there is more people who say no for Europe. And that has been also what EPP has said, that they will not take on board those who say no to helping Ukraine or who say yes to Putin, that we are reading nowadays every morning, that who are the ones and how deep Russian hybrid influence has gone to our structures. And then that's why I still count on EU positive EPP to be very firm to defend for the Europe. And then if we need some legislation, I hope that the cyber is something that we will keep on requiring. Also, many legislation platforms and others are to help keep European coherence and look at our democratic tools, which does not allow the hybrid influence to be done from the third countries and from outside. So we don't do technology regulation in a bubble which is not to also embed the security situation that we all are facing today. I'm from Finland, so it's my duty to remind you if you live somewhere further safe and forget it, what is happening. Do not forget what's happening in Ukraine and with Russia, even there are new crises to evolve, which also have impact here. So this is not regulating tech, forgetting the realities. So that is also, I think, the challenge that if we start weakening Europe and saying that we don't need Europe, like my country, there are some parties say that we will leave EU whenever it's possible because we are already in NATO already for 1 year. So for me, European Union is also a security structure, and then we should enhance our capability to use also this economic security, digital sovereignty, which doesn't mean that we don't play with the partners, but we set the rules that helps us in our situation. And this is really, really my plea to the missing guy from the EPP here on the panel, that keep calm and look for pro-European forces to form the majority in the parliament. So also, I think that opening the GDPR has been voted few times, but then if the aim is to simplify the procedure, or if the aim is that lose the ground that Europe is not protecting privacy anymore, two different things. I think I see the very opposite trend, that waiting for the privacy regulation to go forward in so many states. Is it 14 already in the United States? And they cannot regulate in the federal level. So this is my number 2 plea, that please do not believe too much on the ECR type of politicians who want to do everything nationally. Every single trialogue, every single detail, they said, yes, if we do this, do it nationally. So there is not European market, and I think still the value for our growth, which is also a challenge, has become from the single markets. So do not forget these principles also in the tech regulation.
Dita, what's been your experience working with ECR, ID MEPs, so more to the right, and what files could be hard, or the types of consensus that could be harder to reach in digital policy making in the next mandate?
Just to only say that I fully agree that the impact of the composition of the new parliament will be mostly on perhaps the foreign affairs agenda, defense, Green Deal agenda, and less so visible on digital. But from my experience, there is one issue where I'd like to really see what's going to happen, and it's the issue of how we deal with disinformation, misinformation. Because every time we had to pass some pieces of legislation which tackled these issues, we had the idea and ECR voting against, with the explanation: we don't want censorship, we don't want Brussels to control, we don't want to have a ministry of truth from Brussels. And then we learn later on from the press that some of the politicians were paid by the Russians to be mouthpieces for Russian propaganda. So that's my worry. My worry is what's going to happen with the issues like how we deal with disinformation, how we make sure that we keep, what we always said, the online space also secure, democratically secured. So that for me would be the challenge.
Looking now to international relations, it looks like the latest Tech and Trade and Technology Council was a bit disappointing, and Donald Trump looks like he might be coming potentially to the White House also next year. How do you see the EU and US relationship going forward when it comes to digital? Mia Petra.
I think that we speak the same language, and that is not by accident, but it has been because of the TTC and more regular contacts. So GDPR, I remember meeting the counterparts or even officials that, now I don't say who I'm quoting, but it was an international meeting, and an American said that we cannot even have the visitors list in White House because of your GDPR. So we are going to sue you to the court. And I said, well, it was the sense, you know, remember also in Europe that whether the sports club can have their members list and how to do it. So we have been learning, teaching, and achieving something. It's still difficult for some parts, but then now when AI Act was proposed, I was like in an inconvenient situation to talk straight to Washington the next day, and I was not, of course, in the commission to write it, but then just giving the principles that we don't want to be China, we don't want to be like censored and video surveillance everywhere, real time, and so on and so on. And then now when we keep on meeting each other, the very same language. If you read the executive order on AI, if you read our AI Act, they talk to each other. And the 50 bills drafted in the Hill, they have bits and pieces, and then they say that, okay, now we analyze what you have done, what they can do. Maybe California will do much more, and many states than the federal level. So I think that has been achieved in the TTC, that you have the numbers, you have the people there to talk to each other on the legislative side, and then we have, of course, the companies that work on the both sides. So then the push from the business is also required to be seen then that can we create more common markets. And the data flows even has been, if not 100% solved, at least steps taken, where also the understanding of privacy has helped and should help to come. I don't know how to make the TTC Trump-proof. Don't ask me.
So no solution from you.
No, but it can be something to keep on dialogue, but with different name and structure. Then I'm still happy, but not to lose the contact.
We were in the US like 2-3 weeks ago, and I very much like what you said, that both Democrats and Republicans, they do speak to us, but they don't speak to each other. So that's the problem. So even when it comes to the AI agenda, so our experience was that it's perhaps more efficient really to speak to the states like California or Texas and see what they are doing on the ground. But last week, my political group organized Digital Days. We had our commissioner Thierry Breton present, and he said, look, the Trade Technological Council was launched during the Trump's administration. And he also, shared the details of that very first meeting with Trump, how it all happened, because Trump wanted to have something at the end, he didn't deliver on TTIP, he was not pushing any business and trade agenda, so he wanted to have something. So they came up with this dialogue. So it was the Trump's administration that launched it. Maybe it does not have the speed that we would like to have, but it's going forward. And I also think, based on my experience from the contacts we had, I mean, the digital is the agenda where you can easily find the common language with the US. So I'm positive that it could be a positive agenda, even with the next administration and whoever will win in the States.
Kim, do you also believe that the TTC and this cooperation will remain strong no matter who becomes the next president of the United States?
I'm actually a bit more concerned because, and I think we need to continue the dialogue. I think that's absolutely crucial. But also I have the feeling that the Trump of 4 years ago was just, a little bit of the Trump we are going to see if he gets reelected. The things he's saying about collaborating with Russia or endorsing Russia, actually attacking Europe, I think that's very dangerous. I also don't believe that he's going to be very lenient if he realizes he can actually use some of the big tech companies to his advantage. And then we are kind of in a pickle in Europe, because then we are still completely reliant on infrastructure from, for example, Amazon and Microsoft on making sure that our continent keeps running, and we have no idea what's going to happen. So I really hope that, because this is a bit the thing that I've been seeing in the past years. Yeah, no, we are against China, so we have to be with the US. That's, of course, the mantra. And then, it shouldn't matter whether there is actually an American company building our infrastructure or a European company. I'm not sure if that has been a very wise way of going forward. I think we should have really invested more in European companies that are actually making sure that our infrastructure is European. We've been talking forever about strategic autonomy. Let's also be that in our infrastructure. And then the strategic autonomy is always versus China. But let's also try to be more strategically autonomous versus the United States and make sure we have some European companies that actually are in charge of our infrastructure. Because if Trump at some point says, Amazon, I like you, but I want all your data centers now to be used for the war together with other autocrats, then what? Then we are in trouble. Then we don't have our own proper data centers, and we cannot, and we don't, and our own cloud, etc. So I think we've been a little bit naive that the US would stay our friend forever, but I really hope I'm wrong.
The US at the moment is looking at a bill to force China's ByteDance, the mother company of TikTok, to divest from TikTok or else face a ban for TikTok. S&D MEP Raphael Glucksmann has already said in French media that if he's re-elected, he will push for a special inquiry, saying that Europe and EU lawmakers have been too naive about this specific app and about relationship with China. What do you believe, Kim? If you're re-elected, would you agree with this idea for an inquiry?
I think it's very important we do an inquiry on TikTok, but I also think it's very important we do an inquiry on all the other social media companies. I think that it's very important that we have another look at the merits of these kind of social media companies and what they are doing to us. I've been working a lot on addictive design, trying to make sure that social media apps are created fair and ethically, and not make sure that they only glue us to our phones using all the nasty psychological tricks they can find in the books. And I think it is for us as policymakers, it's our duty to make sure everyone is safe when they use technologies that we have become so dependent on. So I'm very happy to have an inquiry on TikTok, but I really hope we also look at the other ones. Because, for example, we also know that Instagram has already shown to be very bad for the mental health of many people, and that you could call it dangerous for vulnerable people and vulnerable consumers. So I think what we should do is really have another look at social media in general, and see their merits. And because there, of course, are merits. I mean, I'm very aware that a lot of very important movements like the Me Too movement would not have happened without social media. But I think it's very important that we have a look at all the different dangerous aspects. I mean, TikTok is addictive, it's unhealthy, it glues us to our phones, which is bad for our health in general. We know that they might be surveying, but that's still very unclear to what extent they do that. And we also know that they are a huge spreader of disinformation. But actually, these other apps, can also fall in those categories, like Facebook and Instagram and X. So I think it's important we really have another look at these social media apps and see how we can protect our citizens better. And then just focusing on one is not going to solve the issue, for example, of disinformation and people being addicted to their phones. So I would not be a fan of only focusing on one app, because it's a structural problem on the way these apps are made. It's a structural problem of the attention economy. So I would really like to see a broader inquiry on all of that. And I'm happy the Commission is actually already looking at that, of course, in the fitness fairness check. So let's see what's going to happen. But I think it will definitely be a topic. And I hope we're going to make it a broader topic than just looking at TikTok.
Dita, you've been working on cybersecurity as a vice president in charge of that in the European Parliament. What's your view? Are you more of Kim's idea that it's more than TikTok, it's all of the social media, or would you particularly think it would be important to have more scrutiny on some specific companies connected with connections to Chinese firms?
Well, TikTok is already banned on the Parliament's devices. But I very much agree with what Kim said. I think that if you have one problem today, it doesn't mean that you will not have different problem tomorrow. So I think also that we are in different situation than the US. We realize all these challenges many years ago, and that's why you have Digital Services Act, you have basis already that oblige the platforms to behave differently. So for me, this is really a part of the exercise to see whether the legislation is really fit for the current challenges. And that's what I think you will see a lot during the next parliament, is really, checking what the platforms are doing, whether they are delivering on the issues that sometimes they just, voluntarily subscribed to. So I agree that one of the main objectives for all of us should be what to do with the protection of children online, which is linked to the mental health of the society. And there I think we have to do more. But I don't think that, the way to ban, to have new strict rules is perhaps the best way. I think it's also to encourage the businesses to do much more together on a voluntary basis. That's what they have started. They were pushed by our regulation. And for me, this is always the first step, to see whether the businesses can work with us to address these issues. And if it does not work, then we put down the rules on the paper.
We'll hear from Mia Petra, but just to mention that right after Mia Petra, we'll open up the floor for questions. So if you have some, get ready, because we'll be turning to you just afterwards. Mia Petra, what do you think?
I also see that very great interest if USA is now doing something, if it's really happening. I've been hearing it for years from very high, that NIST is saying that now we're going to do it, or now we banned a bit TikTok, and then still TikTok is launching new services inside the TikTok, like click the booth you see on the influencer and buy it. So it's the whole big ecosystem they also try to create. But then really we have to protect our society, and it is on the disinformation, and now we have some tools on the platform. So it applies to all, whoever the service provider or is European, American, Chinese, whoever. So we will see if it works. But then so far, it is this data usage that is the question, that does it leak to China central governance? Does it leak to the security systems, and also the national security challenge by that one? And then I think we hear too much that it is there. So inquiries also are needed if we want to do some more legislation on these very core issues. So I don't like it that saying that you are regulating too much, and no regulation is always better, because this regulation is also coming to the very serious point. If we look at the statistics that 35% of the youngsters need therapists, we don't have that much therapists, or otherwise we have to tax you much more to be able to survive, offer a therapist for every third child. So there has to be preventive measures, and I haven't seen any limiting the time on screen voluntarily. So please do more, and do quickly, and give us the easier space that self-regulation is enough.
All right, we'll now take some questions. If you can raise your hand, keep your question short, direct it to one of the MEPs, mention your name and your organization, that would be great. Yeah, go ahead. The mic will be coming your way.
My name is Andrew Funk from Homeless Entrepreneur. And I'm not sure if you're aware, but the average life expectancy of a homeless person in Europe is 50, which is what it was in 1900 in the UK. And it's gone from 700,000 to 895,000. My question is directed to the person that would like to answer the most, which is, how do you think the AI Act protects and most importantly empowers people experiencing homelessness and poverty to become active working citizens again?
Anyone who feels like they want to answer?
Well, I mean, I worked a lot on homelessness. I've been at the forefront of making sure we have the aim now to end homelessness by 2030 in Europe. When it comes to AI Act, I'm not sure if it is an empowering tool in general, except for making sure that you have transparency. However, of course, what we know is that biometric surveillance in public space is, of course, also something that is being used a lot to make sure that unwanted people are removed from public space. And I think the most horrendous thing that we do as a society is decide that homeless people are unwanted and should not, for example, be in city centers because it doesn't look nice. Because we don't like to be confronted with one of the biggest failures of our society. So I think there we are actually making sure that at least mass surveillance is not targeting them. Making sure that they get back on the labor market, I think, unfortunately, there's no tech fix for that. So we have to make sure that in the program towards ending homelessness, I believe in housing first. I believe in making sure people, the problem is that they don't have a house. You put them in a house, then you help them getting to the labor market. I don't believe in tech fixes for such structural societal problems. So I'm not sure if the AI Act is going to solve homelessness, but I do hope we as a society will.
Thanks, Kim. I'll take a question from here.
Hi, can you hear me? Yeah. Hi, I'm Victoria de Pesson from the European Tech Alliance. So I represent European digital champions, all born and bred in Europe. Thank you very much for your comments. Very interesting. My question is more directed to MEP van Sparentak. You mentioned that we don't need necessarily less rules. And you joked about saying that the EPP saying we always have too many rules and that European companies cannot cope with it. And maybe from the ground, what we see is that we have many rules, yes, always very good intention, but it's actually quite overwhelming still to make it happen, and that there's a real problem in terms of consistency. And we would like to see really more rules fitting together like puzzle pieces. If I have to speak for my members.
Victoria, what's your question? Do you have a question to keep it snappy?
I have questions. So one, what will you do to improve consistency? That's question one. And if you allow me a question number two, Clotilde, is you talked about ethical interfaces, referring a lot to social media, but when we see the work from the parliament, social media are not specifically targeted and it's quite broad. So how do you ensure more consistency among rules? And when you look at misleading practices and how to build ethical interfaces, will you particularly target social media?
Thanks.
Well, when it comes to making sure that all the rules fit together more, I really think there's a few things that we can improve there. We are in these kind of trilogue situations sometimes that can take a lot of time. And I think there's then one particular force that should make sure that everything is very connecting like puzzle pieces. And sometimes political thoughts take a bit more over than actually making sure that this goes well. So I think this is definitely a broader discussion we should have on what role certain entities play during trilogues. And I think that's very important. And I mean, since when the AI Act was launched, even before we went through all this negotiations, I had discussions with my state secretary in the Netherlands, like reading the initial Commission proposal on the AI Act, we were already like, wow, this is difficult to read, even for legal experts. How are we going to make sure businesses will comply? So I think we like when we were having the discussion about sandboxes, for example, this is of course a space where but it was also very interesting that a lot of push was actually for making sure that a sandbox is also a place where you get help on how to comply with legislation in a broader sense. And I think there have been very successful examples, for example, in Norway, on how you can help companies in sandboxes to comply with legislation. And I really think we should help also. We should be more helpful. If we put this legislation on the market, we should be more helpful in making sure that companies can ally. And then when it comes to social media, I think I want to tackle the practices that are harmful. I don't care in which app you're using it. So of course, social media is the one where we know that there are harmful practices on steroids. Sorry, can I get some more water? Maybe. Let me get some more water. But for me, it's for all apps. If you need to leave this tissue.
maybe we can give Kim a break, move on to take a next questions, and then go back to her once she feels a bit better. There was a question over here, if we can have the mic. Right here.
Hi, thank you. My name is Andrew Campling. I run 419 Consulting, and I'm a trustee for the Internet Watch Foundation. At the moment, you mentioned child protection. We know that children are being aggressively targeted in their homes and blackmailed by offenders. The material, the child sex abuse material, is often hosted in Europe. The worst offenders for that are the Netherlands and then Germany. There've been several attempts but failures to actually do something about child sex abuse within the EU. Do you think there's an appetite to tackle that problem, or is it just going to be sort of talk about child protection but no actual action taken? Thank you.
Do you have one specific MEP you're directing your question to, or anyone?
Either of the two that aren't choking.
No, if I may, for me it's very important issue. I've been working on the safer internet for children for 10 years in the Czech Republic. And whenever you meet the parents of a child that was abused online, you realize the gravity of the problem. I'm happy that at least we managed to raise a lot of awareness for the teachers, for the schools, that there are new programs that children are being also taught about their life online. There's a lot that we should do as parents, and then it's triangle. So for me, you have schools, you have parents, and then you have the platforms, the actors. We had a lot of discussion during this mandate how to do it. We were quite stuck because on one hand you want to protect the children online, so you want to make sure that we can use all the tools at our disposal. But some people fear that then it would mean that your WhatsApp communication can be broken, that your security that you have in this communication will not longer be as safe as you think. So on one hand, you had the kind of your privacy. On the other hand, you had the protection of children. I'm always on the side of the protection of children, but I'm not sure that's the majority view nowadays in the parliament. So I think that will be the topic that will stay with us. And hopefully also the DSA will oblige already the platforms to do much more than they have done so far. And then I think there might be last step of certain regulation to come.
I very short, because I agree fully, but then also this children's sexual abusement material online. How hard, because then we have a freedom of speech and then we have this one, but then at the same time we see that the reported cases tripled some or 10 times more after and during and after the COVID. So I hope that we will really, really push that, and there are good NGOs and also Commission helping to find solutions, and I really, really hope that we can stop that. There is always criminality, there is always bad people around, but then when they enlarge the audience, they make even more harm. So we should not at least give up because saying that it's happening more. And then also, I think the knowledge how bad it is should help them. How bad the situation is should help also the political will to be able to act on that one.
We're running out of time, so I think this is going to be it for now for the panel. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for being here with us today. Kim, I hope you feel better soon. Mia, Petra, thanks for joining us. And Dita,
thank you.
Thank you for being here with us today. Since we had a little change of program, we'll now hear from Eric Saarnio from Amazon, and then we'll have a session on connectivity with my colleague Mathieu Paulet. So stick around. You should have Eric and then my colleague Mathieu shortly. Thank you, everyone.
Good morning. My name is Eric Saarnio, and I'm the Vice President of Amazon Devices International. I'm based in Luxembourg, and I've lived in Europe now with my family for more than 12 years. Before I get started, first, I'd like to express my sincere gratitude to the Commission's Executive Vice President for her leadership and commitment to promoting trustworthy AI in the EU. And I'm very grateful and excited for the opportunity to speak to you here today, and very proud to be representing the more than 150,000 Amazonians, which is what we like to call ourselves, who are working for Amazon across the more than 18 EU member states. Today, I'm going to talk to you for the next few minutes about how we approach AI, why Europe is so important for us, and how European decision makers can help unlock AI's full potential. When it comes to the development and use of AI, what we've seen so far is really what I view to be the first steps of a marathon. There's so much in front of us. And there's so many huge opportunities which can benefit society. Just to take one example, AI can play an incredibly important part in helping us meet our climate goals at the speed, scale, and urgency that our planet requires. At Amazon, we use AI to reduce packaging and food waste or to power fulfillment operations more efficiently. Today, European businesses are adopting AI at a fast rate, with a third now utilizing AI, which, if maintained, could contribute an additional 600 billion euros in gross value added to the European economy by 2030. This also could help Europe unlock its AI potential and fulfill the promise of EU's digital decade. We're seeing a plethora of companies develop generative AI models, including several well-known companies, in addition to numerous innovative startups, such as Aleph Alpha, Anthropic, and others. My view is I believe there will be many, potentially thousands of different models, both big and small, that will ultimately succeed. But you may be thinking, so what does this all mean? At Amazon, we believe that AI is going to be transformative across all of our customer experiences. In fact, we already have a personalized shopping in our stores using AI to improve customer recommendations and robotics that optimize order fulfillment in our warehouses. As for the 275,000 European partners that sell on Amazon, our AI capabilities help them grow their business through improved product descriptions, titles, and listing details. And AWS, our cloud computing business, offers customers of all sizes additional cost-effective and innovative options to develop their own models. And although we are passionate about innovation, the starting point of everything we do at Amazon is customer obsession. And that is the approach we've taken on the development and deployment of AI. Amazon has invested heavily over the last 25 years in the development of AI, and we've infused these capabilities into each one of our business units across the globe. But let's wind the clock back to 2014, when Amazon acquired a software company called Ivona. This was a leading text-to-speech technology developer based in Gdańsk, Poland. Ivona's tech ultimately became the voice of Alexa, our voice assistant. And that same technology team helps us make Alexa available in many different languages across the EU today. Every day we hear about how Alexa improves customers' lives. For example, I recently heard from a customer who has a loved one that suffers from onset dementia tell us how Alexa helps by answering his questions like, "What day is it?" over and over again without anybody getting upset or frustrated. Alexa always gives the right answer and provides the comfort in always being there for that person. But that's just one example. You'll have a chance to try Alexa and Prime Video for yourself in the networking area and see how AI supports accessibility for customers with disabilities. But we're not standing still. Our long-standing mission has been to make a conversation with Alexa as natural as it is to talking to a real person. And with the rapid development of generative AI, what we imagined is now well within our reach. Of course, despite the tremendous potential of an AI, there are inherent risks. Amazon is committed to responsible use of AI as the technology advances over time. We've developed our approach on responsible AI both internally and with our partners across 6 key dimensions. First, fairness. Second, explainability. Third, robustness. Fourth, privacy and security. Fifth, governance. And finally, transparency. And additionally, together with academic, industry, civil society, and government partners, we are committed to the continued development and deployment of responsible, reliable, and trustworthy AI technologies. Our research centers, including one in Tübingen, Germany, support this effort. To conclude, it's our suggestion that public and private decision makers need to take the right actions to unlock AI's full potential. We must first create a pro-innovation environment. Future EU policy in AI should be balanced and protect consumers without inhibiting innovation. Also, the international harmonization rules, such as those by the G7 in the field of generative AI, is of crucial importance for an innovation-friendly environment. Second, we need to address Europe's digital skills gap. Surveys show that 73% of employers consider hiring AI-skilled talent a priority. But 3 out of 4 of those that consider it a priority can't find the talent they need. And finally, we need to ensure that businesses of all sizes have access to the latest technologies. Organizations across Europe should be enabled to benefit from the opportunity ahead of us. We're therefore working to democratize access to AI technology. I'd like to finish by saying that I'm incredibly optimistic that the EU can become a leader in AI in the future, and at Amazon, we want to actively support this development and policymakers' efforts. Thank you.